My name is Barbara Coleman. The first time my sister came back into my life after 18 years, she didn't knock the way family does. She rang the doorbell once, sharp, impatient, like someone who expected to be let in. When I opened the door, she was standing there in a fitted blazer, hair smooth, posture confident. Beside her was a man in a gray suit holding a leather briefcase. He smiled politely, the way lawyers do when they're about to ruin your life. "Barbara," my sister said, her lips curving into something that looked like a smile but felt like a threat. "This is William Burke. He's my attorney." My stomach dropped. "We need to talk about my son." The word son hit me harder than any slap ever could. Behind me at the kitchen table, Ethan looked up from his tablet. He didn't say anything. He rarely did. But his eyes, steady, observant, took in everything. My sister, the lawyer, the folder already opening in his hands. "I deserve what's mine," Gloria continued, stepping inside without waiting for permission. "And according to these documents, I've always been there." The lawyer placed the folder on my table like a verdict. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. 18 years of sacrifice, of exhaustion, of loving a child who wasn't technically mine, and suddenly it felt like it could all be erased with ink and stamps. "Barbara," the lawyer said calmly, flipping through pages, "if these records hold up, we may have grounds for custody and access to the financial assets." Financial assets. My sister wasn't here for Ethan. She was here for the money. I looked at my nephew, no, my son in every way that mattered, and my chest tightened so hard I thought I might pass out. That was the moment I realized something terrifying. Love doesn't always protect you. Paper does. 18 years earlier, my life looked nothing like this. I was 25 years old, living alone in a modest apartment in Charlotte, North Carolina, working long hours as a junior data analyst. My life revolved around spreadsheets, deadlines, and the quiet hum of my laptop late at night. I didn't have kids. I didn't plan to. I barely had my own life figured out. Then one evening, my sister Gloria showed up at my door with a toddler holding her hand and a small overnight bag slung over her shoulder. She looked exhausted, thinner than I remembered. Her eyes darted around the hallway like she was afraid someone might see her. "Barbara, I need your help," she said quietly. "Just for a few weeks." The boy, Ethan, clung to her leg. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just stared at the floor, fingers twisting together. "I just need time to get stable," Gloria continued. "I'll be back, I promise." I hesitated. Of course I did. But she was my sister. And the child looked so small standing there, like he barely took up space in the world. "Okay," I said finally. "Just a few weeks." She handed me the bag, knelt down, patted Ethan's head once. Then she walked away. I watched her car disappear down the street. That was the last time I saw her for 18 years. At first, I told myself not to panic. People hit rough patches. Gloria had always been impulsive, drifting from job to job, relationship to relationship. She needed time. That's what family does. You help. The next morning, I tried calling her. No answer. I left a voicemail, then another. By the end of the week, her phone went straight to voicemail. A week later, the number was disconnected. She was gone. And I was alone with a 2-year-old child who didn't speak, didn't respond to his name, and flinched at every loud sound in my apartment. I remember standing in my kitchen that first week, staring at a box of cereal, wondering if toddlers even ate cereal. I poured some into a bowl, added milk. Ethan pushed it away and began humming, a low, constant sound that filled the room. I didn't know what to do. I'd never been a mother. I didn't even babysit much growing up. My job trained me to analyze data, not decode a child's silence. After a few days of trial and error, and more than one breakdown in my bathroom, I took Ethan to a pediatrician. The doctor watched him quietly for several minutes, noted the way he avoided eye contact, the way his fingers fluttered when the lights buzzed overhead. "Miss Coleman," she said gently, "Ethan is on the autism spectrum." The words landed softly, but their weight settled deep. She explained therapy, speech delays, sensory sensitivities, the need for structure. "He may never speak," she added carefully, "but early intervention can help." I nodded like I understood. Inside, I was terrified. I was 25 years old, suddenly responsible for a child with special needs, with no legal guardianship, no help, and no sign that his mother was ever coming back. But when I looked at Ethan, sitting on the exam table, swinging his legs, completely unaware that his future was being discussed, I made a decision I didn't fully understand yet. I wasn't going to leave him. The early years were brutal. Ethan hated noise. The refrigerator hum made him cry. The microwave beep sent him into panic. I learned to move slowly, speak softly, dim the lights, and eliminate anything that could overwhelm him. Touch wasn't always comfort. Sometimes it made things worse. I learned to give him space, to watch his cues, to let him come to me. I gave up nights out. I stopped seeing friends. My world shrank to therapy appointments, carefully planned meals, and a routine so rigid it felt like survival depended on it. Because for Ethan, it did. Every morning was the same breakfast. Every drive followed the same route. Any deviation, any shortcut, any delay, and he would shut down completely. I was exhausted. I worked full-time, often late into the night, then woke up early to prepare Ethan's day. My salary barely covered rent, childcare, therapy, and groceries. There were months I lived on peanut butter sandwiches just to afford his speech sessions. And through all of it, Gloria never called. No birthday cards, no questions, no money, nothing. On the hardest days, when Ethan screamed for hours or refused to leave his room, I wondered if I was ruining both our lives. But then there were moments, small, quiet moments, that kept me going. Like the first time he arranged his toy cars not randomly, but in perfect numerical order. Or the afternoon I noticed him scribbling numbers on paper, patterns that made sense if you knew how to look. Powers of 2, prime numbers, sequences most adults wouldn't recognize. His mind wasn't broken. It was different, and it was extraordinary. By the time Ethan was 6, I'd learned something important. To survive, I needed records. So I documented everything: utility bills, rent payments, therapy schedules, school communications, emails, notes, dates, times. Not because I planned to fight anyone, but because when you're a woman carrying everything alone, the world doesn't take your word for it. Paper becomes your proof. I didn't know it then, but those records would one day save us. At the time, they were just my way of staying afloat, of creating order in a life that felt constantly on the verge of collapse. Ethan grew, quietly, brilliantly. And the farther Gloria faded into the past, the more certain I became of one thing. Whatever happened next, I was his mother in every way that mattered, even if the law hadn't caught up yet. And that belief, that love alone was enough, was about to be tested in ways I never imagined. By the time Ethan turned 7, I stopped waiting for his mother to come back. Not because I forgave her, but because waiting was exhausting, and exhaustion had already taken too much from me. Life settled into a rhythm that only Ethan and I understood. To anyone else, it probably looked restrictive. To us, it was survival. Every morning started at exactly 6:30 a.m. Not 6:25, not 6:35. If the alarm went off late, Ethan's whole body stiffened like he could feel the disruption in his bones. Breakfast was plain oatmeal with banana slices, always placed on the right side of the bowl. The spoon had to be metal, never plastic. The cup had to be blue. I learned these things the hard way. I learned a lot of things the hard way. I learned that autism didn't mean lack of intelligence. It meant intensity, of focus, of sensitivity, of pattern recognition that went far beyond what schools were built to handle. At school, Ethan struggled socially. Group activities overwhelmed him. Loud classrooms sent him spiraling. Teachers complained that he wouldn't participate because he didn't raise his hand or speak up during discussions. But when it came to numbers, logic, and structure, he was years ahead. I remember sitting across from his second-grade teacher during a parent-teacher conference, her hands folded tightly on the desk. "Ethan is unusual," she said carefully. "He's quiet, withdrawn. He doesn't engage the way other kids do." "Is he failing?" I asked. "No," she admitted. "Academically, he's excelling, especially in math. But socially, he's different," I finished for her. She nodded, relieved I'd said it. What she didn't say, but what I heard loud and clear, was that different made people uncomfortable, and uncomfortable kids get pushed aside. When Ethan was 9, the school suggested moving him to a special education classroom full-time. He'd get more support there, the principal told me, her voice smooth and rehearsed. "We just don't have the resources to accommodate his needs in the general classroom." I sat there, gripping my purse so tightly my knuckles turned white. "Have you looked at his test scores?" I asked. She slid a folder across the table. Perfect scores in math, near perfect in science, above average in reading comprehension, despite his limited verbal responses. "He needs challenge," I said, "not isolation." The principal sighed. "Mrs. Coleman, we have to think about what's realistic." What she meant was, your kid is inconvenient. I went home furious and defeated, my head pounding from another day of fighting systems that weren't built for women like me or children like Ethan. That night, after dinner, Ethan sat across from me at the table, quietly lining up his utensils by size. Fork, spoon, knife, perfectly spaced. I watched him, exhausted. And then I noticed something. He wasn't just arranging them. He was measuring, spacing them with exact precision, adjusting millimeters at a time until it matched whatever internal system he was following. "What are you doing?" I asked softly. He didn't look up. Instead, he slid his notebook toward me. On the page was a grid, columns, rows, ratios. He had mapped the table. Something clicked in my chest. This wasn't a child who needed to be protected from the world. This was a child who needed the world to stop underestimating him. That was when I called David Marshall, an education rights attorney a journalist friend had recommended. He met us at a quiet cafe near uptown Charlotte, reviewing Ethan's records carefully. "They're trying to sideline him because it's easier," David said flatly. "But the law is on your side." He explained accommodations, individualized education plans, legal protections I'd never even heard of. For the first time in years, I felt like someone was standing next to me instead of across from me. After weeks of meetings, emails, and paperwork, the school backed down. Ethan stayed in his regular classes, with modifications. A quiet testing room, extra time, written responses instead of oral ones. It wasn't perfect, but it was fair, and fairness felt like victory. At home, Ethan's world expanded in ways I never expected. By age 10, he was obsessed with patterns, not just numbers anymore, but systems, schedules, processes, order. I kept detailed logs of everything: therapy sessions, school notes, utility bills, rent payments. It was partly my analyst brain, partly my need for control in a life that often felt one crisis away from collapse. One afternoon, Ethan watched me balancing our budget at the kitchen table. "Why do you write everything down?" he asked. It was one of the few times he spoke out loud. "So nothing gets missed," I said. "So no one can say we didn't do something." He nodded slowly, absorbing that. A week later, he brought me his tablet. He'd created a simple spreadsheet: dates, expenses, categories. "This is better," he said quietly. I stared at the screen, stunned. From that day on, Ethan tracked everything. Not just money, but routines, school schedules, therapy exercises, even weather patterns. It wasn't obsessive. It was calming. Structure gave him peace. And watching him build systems, simple at first, then increasingly complex, made me realize something else. He wasn't just surviving in a world that overwhelmed him. He was learning how to control it. The years passed faster than I expected. Middle school came with new challenges. Social expectations increased, noise levels rose, group projects multiplied. Ethan withdrew more at school, but at home, he flourished. At 12, he taught himself basic coding through a free app he found online. At 13, he built small programs to organize his homework. At 14, he digitized every record I'd kept since he was a child. "You don't need paper anymore," he told me, scanning documents with surgical precision. "This is safer." Safer. The word stuck with me. Because women like me don't get safety handed to them. We build it. Late at night, after Ethan went to bed, I often sat alone in the quiet apartment staring at my laptop, wondering how long I could keep this up. I was tired, bone tired, emotionally drained, financially stretched. There were days I felt invisible, at work, in society, even within my own extended family who quietly judged me for raising my sister's kid instead of having a life of my own. But then Ethan would show me something new he'd built: a scheduling app, a pattern recognition game, a simple tool that solved a real problem, and I'd remember why I kept going. On Ethan's 15th birthday, I gave him a refurbished laptop I'd saved months to afford. He didn't throw his arms around me or cry. He opened it, turned it on, and got to work. "I'll make something useful," he said. I believed him. By 16, he was taking online college-level programming courses. By 17, he was mentoring younger kids at a local coding camp. By 18, He was typing, about building something bigger. Something for kids like me, he explained one night, eyes glowing with quiet intensity. Something that adjusts to how they think. I watched him, my heart swelling with pride and fear all at once. Because brilliance attracts attention, and attention invites danger. I didn't know then how right that fear would be. All I knew was this: we had built a life from nothing, a fragile one, and the world doesn't like it when women protect what they built without permission. Ethan turned 20 in the spring. I still remember standing in the doorway of his room that morning, watching him sit at his desk, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes locked on the screen. Lines of code scrolled past faster than I could read. "Happy birthday," I said softly. He didn't jump. He never did. He just turned, looked at me, and smiled. A small, genuine smile that he reserved for moments that mattered. "Thank you," he said. Then, after a pause, "I'm close." Close to what, he didn't need to explain. For the past year, Ethan had been working on something quietly, obsessively. He called it a learning platform, but I knew better. It wasn't just software. It was his entire childhood translated into logic, structure for minds that didn't fit traditional classrooms. The app adapted to the user instead of forcing the user to adapt to it. It broke lessons into patterns, adjusted colors and pacing, removed sensory overload, created calm where chaos usually lived. He built it the way he did everything else, carefully, methodically, without asking for permission. I watched from the sidelines, equal parts proud and terrified. Because success changes things, and not always for the better. The call came 2 months later. A Charlotte-based education technology company wanted to meet with Ethan. They'd found his app through a beta testing forum. Parents were talking. Teachers were sharing links. Someone important had noticed. I drove him downtown myself, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter with every mile. "You don't have to talk much," I reminded him. "You can let the demo speak." He nodded. "I know." The meeting lasted less than an hour. I waited in the lobby, staring at a potted plant I'd already memorized leaf by leaf. When the door finally opened, Ethan walked out, his face unreadable. He handed me his tablet. "They want to buy it." I blinked. "Buy it?" $2 million, plus royalties. My knees nearly gave out. $2 million. I thought of every sacrifice, every skipped meal, every sleepless night, every time someone told me I was doing too much or wasting my life. Ethan had done this, not despite his differences, but because of them. On the drive home, neither of us spoke. Not because we didn't have anything to say, but because the weight of it was too big for words. That night, I cried alone in my room, the kind of cry that comes from years of holding everything together with sheer will. The attention followed fast. Articles, interviews, emails from parents thanking Ethan for building something that finally understood their children. A local journalist reached out, someone I trusted, someone who knew how to tell stories without turning people into spectacles. Her article focused on Ethan's work, his vision, his intelligence, not his diagnosis, not his trauma, not me. I appreciated that more than she knew. But exposure has a way of waking sleeping monsters. 2 weeks after the article went live, my doorbell rang. I already knew who it was before I opened the door. Gloria stood there like she'd never left. Older, yes, but polished, controlled, confident. Beside her was a man in a suit. "Barbara," she said, smiling thinly. "Congratulations. You raised quite the success story." My chest tightened. She stepped inside without asking, just like she used to when we were kids, and she took whatever she wanted. "I think it's time we talked about Ethan," she continued, settling into a chair at my kitchen table. The lawyer placed a folder down between us. Custody documents, financial records, visitation logs. They looked real. Too real. "I've always been involved," Gloria said calmly. "I just stayed out of the spotlight." I laughed, a sharp, disbelieving sound that surprised even me. "You abandoned him," I said. "You disappeared." She leaned forward. "That's your version." The lawyer cleared his throat. "Legally, Miss Coleman, these records establish a history of co-parenting and financial contribution." I couldn't breathe. Years of silence, of absence, of nothing. And suddenly she had paper that said she'd been there all along. "This isn't about Ethan," I said quietly. "This is about money." Gloria didn't deny it. "I gave birth to him," she replied. "That entitles me to my share." I felt something inside me crack, not shatter, harden. I called my lawyer the next morning. He reviewed the documents carefully, his expression growing more serious with each page. "These are strong," he admitted. "If we can't disprove them, you could lose custody and access to Ethan's earnings." Lose everything. The words echoed in my head all night. I barely slept. I replayed every memory, every moment, trying to figure out how paper could erase truth so easily. Ethan noticed, of course. He always did. "You're scared," he said quietly the next morning. "Yes," I admitted. He nodded once, then typed something on his tablet and turned it toward me. "Let her speak." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Let her show everything." I didn't understand then, but I trusted him, because every time the world underestimated him, he turned it into an advantage. And whatever he was seeing, I knew it was something the rest of us had missed. The court date was set. The fight was coming. And for the first time in 18 years, I wasn't just fighting to protect Ethan. I was fighting to prove that love, real love, could stand up to lies dressed in legal language. The courthouse in Charlotte felt colder than it should have that morning, not because of the air conditioning, but because of what was at stake. Ethan walked beside me, tablet tucked under his arm, posture calm, steps measured. He looked exactly the same as he did on any other day. If you didn't know better, you'd never guess that his entire future was about to be decided by strangers in black robes and stamped paperwork. I, on the other hand, felt like I was walking into an execution. My lawyer spoke quietly as we took our seats. "Remember," he said, "don't react. Let the process work." I nodded, but inside, everything was screaming. Across the room, Gloria sat straight-backed and composed. She wore a soft, neutral dress, the kind designed to look trustworthy. Her lawyer whispered something to her, and she smiled. That smile made my stomach turn. Court began exactly on time. Her lawyer stood first. He spoke smoothly, confidently, presenting Gloria as a mother who had remained involved behind the scenes, a woman who had trusted her sister to help during a difficult period, and who now simply wanted what was fair. He laid out the documents one by one: visitation logs, financial contributions, a co-parenting agreement. I had never seen in my life. They looked flawless, stamped, signed, formatted perfectly. The judge reviewed them carefully, her expression neutral. Then Gloria took the stand. "I called regularly," she said, voice steady. "I sent money whenever I could. I didn't want to disrupt Ethan's routine, so I stayed in the background." I clenched my jaw. 18 years of silence reduced to a neat narrative. When it was my turn, my lawyer presented my records, thick binders of reality, utility bills, therapy schedules, school correspondence, emails I'd sent to Gloria that bounced back unanswered. "This shows continuous soul caregiving," he argued, "for nearly 2 decades. The judge nodded, but her eyes narrowed slightly. "These records show effort," she said, "but there is no formal guardianship agreement on file." My heart dropped. Paper again. Always paper. Then something unexpected happened. Ethan stood up. The room shifted. "Your Honor," he said clearly, his voice calm but firm. "May I speak?" The judge paused, surprised, then nodded. "Go ahead." Ethan walked to the front of the room and connected his tablet to the screen. "This analyzes document metadata," he explained simply. A chart appeared. Creation dates, file histories, edit timelines. "These documents," he continued, highlighting Gloria's exhibits, "were created within the last 30 days, not 18 years ago." The lawyer stiffened. Ethan tapped again. "The signatures are digitally layered. Font spacing is inconsistent. Transaction IDs repeat across different dates." The courtroom went silent. Gloria's face drained of color. Ethan didn't stop. "This," he said, opening another file, "is my archive." A timeline filled the screen. 18 years of life meticulously logged. Emails, bills, therapy records, school portals, time-stamped, cross-referenced, continuous. "There is no record of her," he said quietly, "because she wasn't there." The judge leaned forward, eyes sharp now. After a brief recess, she returned with a decision. "The respondent's documents are fraudulent," she said firmly. "This court finds attempted financial exploitation and perjury." Gloria stared straight ahead, frozen. "A no-contact order is issued," the judge continued, "and legal guardianship is granted to Barbara Coleman." I exhaled for the first time in hours. Ethan reached for my hand. Months later, life looked different, calmer. Ethan used his earnings to build a company focused on accessibility and education. He hired people who understood structure, logic, and quiet brilliance. As for me, I finally rested. I stopped apologizing for choosing responsibility over approval. I stopped explaining myself. Because here's the truth I want every woman watching this to hear. You are not weak for carrying everyone else. You are strong for knowing when to protect what you built. Family isn't who shows up when there's money. It's who stayed when there was nothing. And that is something no lawyer can ever take away.